next. Okay, cool.
Well, I think they've got an echo here. Let's.
No, it's a microphone.
My own? Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah. All right.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Medica. Welcome to the next-gen health ecosystem. Today, we would like to take you in the journey in the future, but the future which is today, and the future of the next health. I would like to start with a very inspirational story of Eric.
I was never a morning person, but I would drag myself out to get the best tides. To me, surfing is about individual freedom, feeling the wave twist and thrust under your feet, and the soft fluid motion as you match the energy that was created by the wind some 2,000 miles away. I was 36 when I was diagnosed with ALS. My name is Eric Valor. I was an avid surfer, snowboarder and scuba diver. Now, I cannot scratch an itch. I cannot walk the beach with my girlfriend. I cannot surf. I am constantly frustrated by my inability to do the physical tasks I used to do so well. But I actually have a pretty fulfilling life. Technology has given me a voice that ALS took from me. Now I am a self-taught neuroscientist who can talk competently and work with established professionals in the field. So I have full days and nights with work and online socialization. My life is filled with goodness. There are just now some reasonably interesting drugs coming into trials and we need to get them through quickly. Clinical trials represent life, period. The average length of survival from diagnosis of ALS is 2 to 5 years. The odds are you won't be alive if that drug hits the market. This cost to patients and to medical research is too high. I've been involved in trying to compress the time required for enrollment in order to finish trials earlier. We need to be our own advocates and find partners like Antidote who can help us. Together we can erase the death sentence that is ALS.
What an inspirational story, isn't that? So we see a lot of interest in development, the new technologies, the personal life, the life of the individual. It's not just the life of the patient, it's a life of individuals. And today we would love to take you in this journey of patient centricity, user centricity, and the journey of the old, and compare the old, current, and the new healthcare ecosystem. So, my name is Nana Bitaragim. I'm physician scientist and healthcare catalyst, and I'm building in Berlin something new, a new platform, festival platform, Expomed. My co-presenter.
Hi, I'm Dimitri Katz. So I'm here as two roles today. So on one hand, I'm here as a patient advocate. I've lived with diabetes since I was 13 years old, so you can guess that's more than a few years now. And I'm also in human-computer interaction as a researcher, so I've been looking at how we can use ubiquitous computing technologies to support chronic disease management, focusing on type 1 diabetes. And I've also been looking a lot at why current systems in which ways they are working and in which ways they are not working, because we can't pretend that these are miracle cures and that apps will solve everything. So the question is, where do we go from here?
And why? and how we can design and co-create the user-centric ecosystem. But let's have a look at the current system. We call it sick care system because this system builds on the hierarchical relationship between the traditional healthcare stakeholders. You see the stakeholders, the payers, the industry, the policymakers at the upper part, and you see the patients, individuals, the users, and the down part. The decision maker goes from up to down, and the patients and the users, we basically don't have our own voice, don't have opportunity to share the data, to share our conditions, to share our individual lives.
So if we look at this system, we'd say, is this a bad system? And of course the answer is it depends. In some situations, this is a pretty good solution, like for trauma care. You come in, you don't want to have to think a lot. You don't want to have to make a lot of decisions. You want someone to take care of you. But is this a good solution for chronic condition management? And I think the evidence would say not really. So we talk about compliance, adherence, and we know that in conditions like diabetes, the patients are typically not compliant, not adherent. What does that mean? They don't follow what they're told to do. Maybe they do it for a week after their visit, but basically they don't do it. So the evidence is saying that this system is not a very good system when it comes to the lifestyle changes that people need to manage chronic health conditions. And we're seeing this all through the health system.
We see a lot of challenges with the time. It's not so fast. We see a problem with the distance and place. We experience the lack in the labor and the knowledge. So how we can bring the billion, trillion dollar healthcare market in the new way, in the new level. And I think that 2018 offers us a completely interesting environment, new players, new collaboration partners, new approaches, new tools. I think and I strongly believe the current healthcare becomes and transforms in the home-based care. So we have gadgets, we use the different devices, which is quite portable and quite easy to track, to monitor, to share the data, to own the data. What do you think, Dimitri?
So I can speak from personal experience here. So I wear a continual glucose monitor, as do many, many people I know in the diabetes community. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with this. When I was first diagnosed as a diabetic, which was many years ago, I was really fortunate that the home diagnostic systems had just come in. You had to wash the strip with water. The meter had to be plugged into an outlet. It wasn't really portable, especially for me as a teenager. So I rarely tested with a digital system. I usually used urine tests, which were quite inaccurate. So then over time, that moved to portable systems, strips, which was great. It stayed there for many years, and then the CGM came along. So now I wear an embedded sensor. I wear it for 2 weeks at a time, then put in a new sensor. I do it myself. I don't need a doctor. And what does that give me? Well, it gives me a continuous data stream, or near continuous, say every 15 minutes. That allows me to see how is my blood glucose level throughout the night. It allows a much fuller picture of what's going on, so cause and effect. It also allows for analytics. We can start to get predictions about where am I going. I get an arrow that tells me, am I going up, am I going down, am I stable? So having this fuller picture that we can get with these new technologies really opens up new capabilities for the clinician, certainly, but also for the individual to better self-manage their conditions.
Furthermore, an interesting fact that now we can disrupt, and the technology helps us in that way, we can disrupt also our biology. So the fundamental feature of human beings, our genes, thanks to the CRISPR-Cas technologies and the reduction in the prices of gene sequencing, we can own our genome, our data, and use this data to learn more about us ourselves, plus to share this data with the healthcare providers. I think the new models and new collaborations coming also through the cooperation and collaboration between the startups and different companies. I would say we experiencing the era of the startup 0.2, because the startups basically have their own voice, disrupting the tech companies, bringing the solutions in different areas. One of the example comes in the area of drug discoveries, which is quite costly and takes a while to bring and to develop the compound and blockbuster to the market. Thanks to that collaborations, thanks to the emerging technologies, we can shorten in the time of discoveries, and we can bring this process in the most effective way. I think the other examples comes also in the field of oncology. Here is an example where the Flatiron company, a startup, was acquired by 300 years old company Roche. So we see the collaboration, we see the model where the old stakeholder of the current ecosystem looking at a new reinvention through the collaboration with another and new players, and bringing the current state of precision medicine, really individual precise medicine on the level of data-driven medicine. I would think that in the next couple of years, some of us, or most of us, will probably wear some sensors inside or some devices inside. What do you think?
So,
Dmitry?
of course, I'm biased because I do wear one and I've really embraced this technology. And I have to say that before I wore it, I was suspicious. I'd read some clinical studies that sort of questioned how much this really helped. And then I started hearing it was pretty good. And then I got one, and of course, it's amazing to have that reduction in friction for getting data. It's so easy now just to scan. I just scan whenever I need it. And but at the same time, you can't count on each individual to embrace every technology. So, for example, I don't wear an insulin pump, even though many people I know do. For whatever reason, psychologically, I just don't like having that thing attached to me. So we have to keep in mind that different people are different, what they're comfortable wearing. That being said, this is giving us, so for example, continual glucose monitors that are non-invasive, they just haven't managed to work so far. There's been probably billions of dollars invested in trying to develop them, and they have failed again and again. So there are certain kinds of data that it appears, at least for the near future, we're going to have to put sensors inside people. I know that I've adopted this technology, and most people that I know in the community have happily adopted this too. So if the value is there and the discomfort is not too great, then I think that people will eagerly adopt these technologies. And if we look at wearables, how that's really entered the mass market. So tracking, gathering data, these have become quite acceptable to people. As always, it's a question of what is the value that's being provided and what are the inconveniences.
And currently we experience in the next level digital therapeutics. Although the digital therapeutics era started last year, November, exactly a year ago, when the Proteus launched the cooperation with Otsuka. But I would like to point you in a different level of the digital therapeutics, which addressed the patient behaviors, which addressed also patient education. And this is an amazing thing what is coming in. So we think the next stakeholders, the payers, how to disrupt payers. We have a different interesting models come from the different regions and geographical areas. We see that the current market offers the digital health insurances companies, the insurances companies and digital solutions. And using these digital solutions, which can be applied globally, helps us to drive new models in the area of fintech and insurance tech. So basically, we brought up and we discussed briefly new players, new collaborations, new models, and now we would love to highlight the aspect which we think as essential to build and develop the next-gen health ecosystem.
Right, so a critical issue here is that we're not talking about simple solutions, unfortunately. So the first generation was this idea that you provided an app to someone and they'd log a lot of data and they'd look at it and they would miraculously change their behaviors and everything would be great. And the evidence on that just isn't very good. There are some people who it helps, but by and large, it's not looking very good. So what we're thinking about now, what we're moving towards this next generation is fairly complex systems where we have to integrate together the stakeholders, the services, the devices that are gathering the data, the methods of moving data around. They've all got to work together, and everyone has to embrace this system. So in terms of this, in terms of the advantages that it's giving, it's the ability to customize. So previously, one size fits all, we know this does not work well for chronic disease management because everyone has different responsibilities, everyone's condition is different, the requirements that people have, their job, their children. You can't just tell people what to do and expect them to follow the schedule. It's not viable. So these systems allow us to see what potentially to see what behaviors people are doing that are really helping them, and then to reinforce those behaviors. Conversely, to look at what behaviors are non-beneficial and let them know that. Perhaps this helps them to overcome their biases. We're going to require a lot of transparency with these systems because people are going to have to embrace them. They're not going to just passively get a pill. They're going to have to take part in that. So there are a lot of challenges there. Obviously, this is moving towards patient empowerment, more people taking more ownership of their own health.
And I think that this is our vision, the vision of the next health ecosystem. We, with the purpose, put the users, individuals, the patients in the focus, in the middle. You will never find the hierarchical system. You see the different players and stakeholders, the old one and new one. They are connected through the value. They are connected through the results, outcomes. And we basically would love to see a more open, and I think the system should be based on the open innovation approaches. The open innovation, the transparency, and the collaboration within the different partners gives the opportunities to develop and to build further the relationship within the ecosystem. But the patient centricity, this is the way to reinvent a broken system and give a different meaning in the system and bring the value. I think we would love to continue this dialogue with all of you, and I have a great opportunity here today to welcome the experts from different fields who come over to Medica, to Düsseldorf, and dig deeply in this topic and discuss with you the interest and the building of new healthcare ecosystem. I would like to welcome to the stage my colleagues. Let's start, Anya. Please. Mali Baum. Joscha Hoffenberg. Tjasa Zeig. Please sit down. You have the microphones? Yeah. Let's start our round with the introduction and tell us something about yourself. Tell us a few things what we will never find on Google.
So why don't you go ahead?
I go ahead. Hi. My name is Joscha Hoffenberg. I'm actually a psychologist by training, and something that you will probably not find on my LinkedIn profile or on Google is that I actually didn't want to study psychology. And during my studies, I realized that psychology as it is today is kind of boring because for me it was not innovative enough. It wasn't really something where we try to go forward. We did treat the patients as we did treat them 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and we did our research as we did it 10 years, 20 years, 50 years ago. So I always wanted to study medicine additionally, but then I wasn't really patient enough to do so. and went into the field of digital healthcare and especially digital or e-mental health. And I'm now working for a company that is providing a software for psychologists for treatment of patients. And additionally, next to my full-time job, I'm the strategy lead and chairman of Hacking Health Berlin. For everybody of you who does not know Hacking Health is a global organization which is coming from Canada, was developed in Canada, and our idea is to bring together specialists and people from different fields together to work and innovate healthcare. So we bring together people from the tech, from healthcare, from IT, from business, from design, and let them work together in workshops and hackathons to find new innovative ideas.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dyasha Zaitz. I'm a former healthcare journalist, still a host of Faces of Digital Health podcast, but I currently work as a business developer for a company called Marant, which is working on an open data platform for healthcare data storage. And what you will not find on Google is that one of my favorite books that I bought 6 copies of lately, and I'm buying it to everyone that is interested in medicine and healthcare, is called This Is Going to Hurt. It's written by a UK-based doctor, I think it's Adam Smith, but and I would really recommend it if you want to learn a little bit more about how the NHS works and laugh a lot when you do the reading, because the author unfortunately left medicine and he's now a stand-up comedian. So I can assure you it's a funny book.
Probably it works together very well.
Thank you, Nana, for having us here. My name is Mali Baum, and we built in Berlin a very successful network that's called W Lounge for the tech ecosystem. We are also focusing on healthcare in our network, and what we are doing is actually bringing the corporates, so-called Mittelstand, to start to be very active into the tech ecosystem and investing and collaborating with startups, because we find out that this is the mix and match that we need to see more and more, and to see the old industry supporting the new industry and the technology. Together with that, we are raising a new fund from Berlin that will invest mainly, but not only, into the DACH area. It's called Magda Group because we see that there is a problem. We want to close the gap for seed round. There is a big problem in Germany and the DACH area with, let's say, successful startup or smart startup product that how to raise the seed round money for their product. And also we will invest and to raise the awareness in the diversity. And the one thing that you cannot find on my LinkedIn is that I have 2 teenagers at home, and one of them is my daughter, Tamara, and I really want her to feel that she can reach everything that she will want to, and I really want to see more women active, definitely into the healthcare ecosystem as a science, as a CEOs on startups, and have the courage to be very, very active on it.
Thank you. Obviously, we are in the majority here in the panel. If you can find other panel we're representing the more female speakers, so please come over and let me know. Thank you, Mali. Anja, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here and to be part of such a wonderful panel. My name is Anja Silberbauer. I'm Austrian. I studied also something else. I studied international management and business and law with the focus always on innovations and business development. But I also worked a lot of abroad. But since 3 years, we founded a startup called Harmony and Care, which is in the area of intersections of psychology, IT, care, and business for sure as well. And since 2 investment rounds, where we were also part in the Austrian Shark Tank, you might know it with Höhle der Löwen in Germany, where we got also a big investment. And since 3 years, I'm CEO of the startup. And what you don't know, maybe, I mean, I love climbing, I love skiing, like all Austrians might do. And I'm happy that the panel today is not in German, because Austrian German is always not easy to get.
Thank you, Anya. So maybe I will start with you. Then interesting development in the startup area, early innovations. This is basically the way how to transform and to bring in early innovations in the market. How do you see that? In what is the role, the new role of the startups in the ecosystem? Could you please elaborate this?
I mean, maybe I can also tell it with our founding story more or less, because we were, from the beginning, we had a really user-centric picture and everything. Because my co-founder, Herwig, he was working 20 years in America for Hilton IT, and then both his parents needed 24-hour care. So he came back to Klagenfurt, to Austria, and so, okay, what is the kind of environment over there? What could it be? And after looking at the sector, 24-hour care was the best opportunity because it was the cheapest. But who don't know 24-hour care, it's that caregivers from abroad, from Germany, mostly from Poland, in Austria, mostly from Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, are sent over to Austria, Germany, where it looked a little bit on the care expertise, but normally you don't have much, and a little bit on the German knowledge, but otherwise it's just sent over. And he also took this kind of opportunity, and he saw, okay, a caregiver is just sent over from Romania, and during 3 months he had 10 care changes. But on the feedback that it was just not, from the social, psychological side, not just fitting to his mom. So the care expertise was there, but they didn't match on the personality. So he thought, why in this kind of long-term relationship where someone is 24 hours, several days over there, no psychosocial matching is done. So we started off to develop with the University of Klagenfurt, with the psychology department, IT department, a testing instrument where we could test caregivers and caretakers and do matching. We started with a 300-question big survey and questionnaire, sized it down to 80 over 2.5 years, and we are selling that product already to Germany, Austria, UK, other countries, and now also to America. And we also see now that psychosocial matching is not just important in 24-hour care, but we also developed something similar for hospitals and mobile care, because we see, okay, care expertise is important, but the psychosocial factors in this area are really overlooked, and so there are many, many care changes. So I thought it's a good example, maybe.
Absolutely, it's a very interesting story because basically it tackles the not just the new approaches, but it tackles the development, it tackles the problem on the different side, and it tackles the open innovation. It's as I understood, you were the spin-off from the university in so academic area. So this is the way I think how we can just massively emerge the development of a new relationship. And talking about the startups, I'm thinking about the new financial landscapes and the financial investment landscapes, the new financial models. Maybe Mali, maybe you can elaborate this more and give us some new insight in this area.
Definitely there are differentiation between countries. Let's focus for a second in Germany. What we see, and we talked about that earlier, we see a big problem. We see that, let's say, startup, there is two things. There is technology and there is deep tech. So in technology, it's the regular things. You have to get the seed round, and then your startup, you have a growth in your startup, so all the regulars. I would say that in Germany, in DACH area, startup investors and also Mittelstand and corporate, they are very risk averse, which means it's very slowly going to a better way, but it's still very slow, which means if you have the same team and the same product and you are in Silicon Valley or Tel Aviv, probably you will beat the Germans so fast only because that the German need to always in parallel work on fundraising together with building the product because the seed round is very low. And I can say in the science side that we saw also from universities, first of all, a lot of science people that raising new products, so-called startups, they are stuck into the university, which means the university sometimes own the IPs. So you understand what it's doing business-wise to the product. And also there is not enough investors that, let's say, keen to support this kind of project, at least not enough, because when you search like doing really deep tech science, you need a lot of time for research. So the investors need to be very unique investors. They have a lot of patience to wait for results and probably success or whatever. In other markets, it's not that good, but it's by far faster and more, let's say, capital is available.
Doesn't mean that we have to educate investors more science-wise, more given the insights, the new models, and insights in the value of those innovation ideas?
My answer is yes, 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 and that's the main reason we actually took the decision to raise a new fund, and that's exactly the value that we want to bring in. Because we have the right network, so even if it will be the local Mittelstand or investor or the foreigners like Chinese or American or Israel that can find very smart people here and smart products, we want to be the door for them for German market. So yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Interesting that the new technologies offers not just the new models in financial area, not just supports the early innovation, but also brings the democratization in the area of healthcare. So it's probably a little bit funny or ironic to say democratization, because basically the health and the healthcare most important thing in the life. And then why we need to democratize our healthcare? Do we need that, Tiasha? And how we can do that? Do you have a secret or do you have a solution for that?
I would say that the so-called democratization of healthcare began basically with smartphones and with healthcare apps. So suddenly you had all these new sources of information and all these new solutions on how to approach various healthcare problems. Now, the problem with these apps is that, as was mentioned in the beginning, that compared to the growth of healthcare apps, the number last year was, I think, 325,000 apps on the market, but the actual use is far from that. But it's definitely true that access is here, and also healthcare institutions are looking at new ways of how to connect to patients, how patients have new ways of connecting among each other. So there's new avenues that opened up. And of course then there's the aspect and the promise of blockchain that's bringing another dimension in the space, which is bringing more trust and potential patient data ownership to the patient. That's one big question that's been opened up with this new technology.
Do you agree, Dmitry? Would you support that the blockchain technologies, democratization, open mindset, they brings a different value in patient and doctor relationship? I would like to address you as a UX researcher. What would be your take on?
Well, first of all, we have to be careful of hype, as always. So blockchain is being hyped for a lot of things. So for people who aren't familiar with blockchain, distributed ledger, basically rather than having one central repository for all the data, you put it in a lot of places and you gain safety by distributing it. So this is a very interesting technology, far beyond Bitcoin in terms of assurance. I think it's very intriguing for what we could do with health data in terms of allowing people to collect their data and then have a very strong record over who's accessed it and for what purpose. I find that to be very intriguing, especially because we also have to look at, I say it's my first move to Germany, and I heard people always say security and privacy, and at first I thought, well, let's develop the systems and worry about that later. But now I've come to realize that no, security and privacy are incredibly important, especially when we're talking about monitoring systems that are going to be enabling. We already, with our smartphones and our browsing, are allowing profiles of people. What we're potentially allowing for the dangers of these systems are huge. So I think coming up with systems where people can both compile, store their personal data, and also maintain control over it in a safe way, I think is crucial. And for providing trust, for people to adopt these systems, use these systems, I think it's just incredibly important that we as a society can protect people from their own data in the sense of it being used against them.
So we discussed the trust, transparency is a huge need as a foundation for building the next gen healthcare ecosystem. But I think the time point is very important. The time where the discoveries come to the product, the time where the innovation, the ideas will be developed in something specific and will come to the patient, to the end users, it takes a while. How we can catalyze this process, Joshua? What do you think? Do you have an idea?
I think so. When we compare Germany to other markets in this regards, we see that especially innovative ideas here in Germany, and I don't want to blame Germany for everything and just make it bad, but I think we are not fast enough in developing ideas that are coming from healthcare professionals, are coming from the IT, coming from the business, developing them further and bringing them into the market to test them and also to understand what the needs are for our patients in general. If we look at other markets, for instance, in Canada, where Hacking Health is coming from, Hacking Health there is implemented in the hospitals directly, and within these hospitals, each department has to come up with at least one topic per year that they think needs to be innovated. So each year, each department needs to come up with an idea of how they could improve their work. And these ideas are transferred then into a sprint or into an ideation process, into a hackathon, and were developed further and directly implemented in this hospital. And the process between the idea that is coming mostly from the professionals, from the healthcare professionals, until the patient are much shorter than we have it here in Germany. Our system here in Germany works mostly mostly is the situation. There is somebody who has an idea, either it is from outside of a hospital or it is inside, it is research. And then it takes a long time going through RCTs, going through a lot of stages that an idea has to prove itself first until it is implemented and is used or used by the patients. I want to make sure that this is. I do agree with your point that the data privacy is a very, very important thing. And I think we're in Germany, we're in a situation where we focus a lot on quality, and we focus a lot on ensuring that the data of the patients are secured. And I do 100% agree with that. But I think we also have to open up to certain stages between that. We need to open up a bit to trying to prove ideas in a very, very short amount of time to really see if they are valuable for the patient or not. And that also accounts for startups. If we look at our startup scene, the ideas are good, but executing them is sometimes very hard, especially when it comes to RCTs that needs to be done. That takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of money that needs to be done. And for a startup that is not funded with a lot of money, they cannot do that, and good ideas are lost and are not there to be taken over into a hospital, into a practice, onto the patient.
Yeah, and maybe Dmitry, you want to add
Yeah, I
something?
want to add 2 points onto there. First of all, I'd add to those stakeholders the essential, the patients. So we've seen, especially in the diabetes space, a lot of patient-driven innovation recently. Even though the hybrid closed-loop systems were in development by industry because of regulatory hurdles, they were unable to push them forward. The patient initiative groups have built them. They're self-building them without regulation, and without a doubt, they're pushing the technology forward. There's plenty of developers who are in that community who can develop and write code just, well, more or less just as well as people in industry. So I think that's a critical component, and I also agree we need to look at other methods besides RCTs, especially because RCTs are not well suited to software. The idea that you have started with something and you have to finish with that 3 years later, that's not how software works. Software is constantly being iterated upon, constantly being improved. So we also really need to think about, with these technologies, we really need radical new ways of testing the technologies to support iterative development processes. The traditional methods used for molecules are just not well suited to this sorts of system.
So speed, distance, and place, very important in that case. And we just a week after the successful Hacking Health Hackathon, which just last weekend was completed in Berlin with completely interesting outcomes, with focusing on the female's health. First ever Hacking Female Health Hackathon, which is running in Berlin and globally. Zsuzsa, maybe you can bring some interesting, maybe you can just give some results or just insights on results. And I think they were amazing. Most of us were participants as mentors at the hackathon.
Yes, sure. So we this year, after we did our hackathon in last year at the Charité in Berlin, we did it this year with the Charité together with Fraunhofer Ventures. The idea behind that cooperation was that we took the technology from Fraunhofer and used them for healthcare solutions. We focused this year on female health, as female health was for us in most of the fields kind of neglected still, unfortunately. And we found out, and this is maybe one of our most surprising outcomes from this hackathon, is usually a hackathon is we have like 80% male participants and 20% female participants. This time we changed it. We had 75% female participant and 25 male participants, which is quite a good number when we are speaking about 90 participants in total. And the outcome of this hackathon, which was very interesting, we focused on 5 different challenges. So we defined certain fields, which was mental health, geriatrics, endometriosis, and 2 other challenges. The outcomes were quite interesting. We had developments in the field, mostly in the field of mental health, which is for me a very positive outcome, but also in the field of the aspect that mental health is very much connected to most of all other problems that we see in the medical field, but also in female health. And we had our winners were the projects of our winners were very interesting, as they built solutions with the technology from Fraunhofer, implemented them with their medical knowledge into a system that really turned out into something that is now further developed from Fraunhofer in their accelerator, but also supported by the HPI, Hasso-Plattner Institute in Potsdam, and will also be further developed from the teams in other accelerators. So in general, we can say with these hackathons and with this event, we did the first step. We did the first step of an innovative process that is longer than we did it. But within 2.5 days, we were able to really identify the needs, identify information, ideas, and really build the first prototype, which will hopefully be further developed from the teams.
Implemented, yeah. This is basically the healthcare ecosystem in action, 2 nights and 3 days, and from idea to the current solution. Now I would like to ask you, having the fantastic panel representing different regions and different geographical regions, I would like to ask you about your personal experience living in different countries and compare the different ecosystem, different landscape. How are they different? What is it, like in 3 words, maybe on the 3 factors, what is it, the advantages and benefits of different regions and building the healthcare relationship, and what is might be disadvantages? Anja,
Maybe I'll start. I will start a focus on Austria. To sum it up, I think less investors, less accelerators, more chances to get an investment maybe as a German startup, and maybe an unproblematic trying of things in Austria. Maybe I will mention that best Austrian startups, they have the luck that they can more or less try something in Austria because it's a really small market, and can turn the product to change it to the actual needs and then go to Germany. So the product is already pretty finished going to Germany, and it's better than in Austria, and Austrians tend to forget, and then there's a cycle normally going from Germany back to Austria with the finished product. So I see that's easy, and also from kind of the region for us Austrians, it's always good that we have the German-speaking region because Austria is far too small for doing something. The only thing what I see problematic is investments because we don't have any accelerator, any investors specialized in health. So most of us, when we like to have the first investment in Austria, we go to a normal institutional investor, business angel who has a network but don't have a real knowledge in health, which is not always bad, but sometimes a little bit problematic. And for second round investments, Series B investments, mostly Austrians are going to Germany, to US. And I see also the ecosystem is a little bit growing because this year they opened in Vienna the first health hub Vienna, where they take 20 to 25 startups each year and have also the process, and I think that's the first step inside the market.
So interesting, yeah, that's an interesting insight and from personal experience in the Austrian market. What about the Israeli market? It's probably most advanced market in the world in healthcare.
I wouldn't say so, but I was born in Tel Aviv, and in some things, moving to Germany 5 years ago, business-wise, technology-wise, it's kind of like coming from the future, which means when I came as entrepreneur to Germany, I saw heaven because there is a lot of public money, there is a lot of way better business culture, there is a lot of startup evaluation, which is much more realistic. There's a lot of good things. But Israel is Israel. The Israeli need to fight to keep existing. So the Israeli are not waiting for the government, are not waiting for no one. If you have an idea, you just go get it. And this is the differentiation. And you can see in Israel, in the north and in the south, huge collaboration with universities, with huge corporates. They are not Israeli corporates, they are mainly American and Chinese, that's very active, but it's became kind of like hubs. So the doctors from universities and business people and also science and technology people gather force together and becoming a huge significant hub, which means that kind of like gathering force, different angle, building amazing puzzle, and then go with it to the industry. So this is smart way to build up a new innovation. So I think it's more into the culture. Like if you see your product, if you see the fit, you just go get there, raise the money, whatever, go outside, which is also different from Germany. Like in Israel, if you have opportunity, you just leave and build your business there. Like my sister lives in Silicon Valley for 10 years, and there is a reason for that. The opportunities are there, and mainly the money is there. But the difference in Germany or in DACH area in Europe, we have money here, a lot of money, but it's still not available enough. So I would say that that's right now the biggest obstacle for the industry.
Yeah, this basically supports what Anya mentioned with the Austrian market. How about the here representing the East market in Slovenia? What is going on and how it's, can we go and start up a company? Would you recommend it?
So if I maybe start with the healthcare situation and digital health or e-health, if you want to call it that way. In that sense, Slovenia is pretty advanced, especially if I would try to compare it to Germany. We've had the electronic medical card since the 90s. We have a national backbone, which means that all the specialist discharge letters are stored in the cloud, and each patient can see that. And we've got e-prescriptions, which means that, for example, especially if you're a chronic patient and you run out of drugs, you can simply call the doctor to the office, and the prescription is going to come into the pharmacy. So you simply just go you do one phone call and then go to the pharmacy. So that's relatively good compared to some other countries. But when it comes to innovation and digital health startups, say similarly to Austria, there is no specific accelerator or incubator. Berlin, I think, is very specific in that sense that the digital health space here is really strong with the Bayer's Grants for Apps Accelerator, Startup Bootcamp, and other initiatives. So the problem that Slovenian entrepreneurs face is that the country is small, and despite the market being global, in the end, investors oftentimes still like to have their startups in physical proximity, you know. So even if investors will say that they invest globally, in the end you will see that German investors will prefer to invest in German solutions. So you have to look at things on more regional level.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we learn many interesting things: market size, different financial models, a culture, which is essential to especially in the healthcare, to build something new and to bring the product to user. Maybe Dmitry, you can also give us your personal insight when you move from United States to Berlin, to Germany. What was the experience? What was your first experience of healthcare, and how was it? How was it different?
Right. So I grew up in San Francisco, and I had, as a young person, I had access to pretty cutting-edge healthcare at UCSF, which had a very strong research program. I think I agree with many of the things people have said already. Obviously, San Francisco has a sort of utopian innovation capitalist culture, which leads to a lot of very quick-paced innovation. Much of what's going on is there, and it's a reinforcing feedback loop. The money's there, the promotion is there, and I don't think that the engineers are any better there than they are in Germany, but the promoters sure are. They're good at selling dreams there. Germans tend to be like, well, I don't know, maybe it'll work, but maybe not. Whereas Americans are just like, this is the greatest thing ever. It's all lies, but who cares? We'll fix it. The next
Also
round
the
will be better.
Israelis.
The Israelis too, a similar culture, right? So when I first moved to Germany, things were still I've been here a while. Things still seem pretty primitive. The startup scene was not. It was after the big crash, and it was quite slow. Money was very tight. I'd been living in New York, which was just a totally different economic system. However, things have advanced quite a bit. Obviously, there's still a lot of risk adverseness, which is not necessarily well suited to startup culture. On the other hand, I think, to be fair, if I were to compare the German healthcare system in general to the American one, I would certainly rather be here than there, because American healthcare is great if you're working at Google, but if you lose that Google job, then you've got a problem. And German healthcare might not be always the absolute best in every case, but by and large, it does a pretty good job at keeping people healthy and alive. So, I think we have to be careful. I think that risk adverseness has its downsides, but it also has its upsides. So, as always, it's a question of finding the balance where we can encourage innovation, but clearly where Germans are not very strong is on how to sell stuff. It's still the pattern largely that if you want to sell stuff, you've got to go to the valley to take advantage of that ecosystem to really. Oh, and one other thing, Germans often have this problem that they think locally. They think the German market instead of thinking the world market. And I think in today's world, we really have to think about the world.
So building the new, more open mindset is very important. Tiasha, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I've been following the digital health space for a while now, and especially the US healthcare system and the way the Americans work. And my takeaway would definitely be exactly what you said. Like, if you're a startup and when you're looking for a salesperson, just take an American, because they know how to sell stuff in a ways that we just aren't able to, because of the difference in the mindset. So if I were a startup and if I had the opportunity to go to San Francisco or wherever for a year or two and then come back, I think that's a perfect combination, because you get some skills that come very handy here, and you can't really learn them here in the same way that you can in the US.
I want to add to that, because there are some very good things as well, and there are some positive and negative, but if I can compare the things, and I also know a bit about the state because I worked a lot in the state, is that if you need something, there is a lot of government support here. Like you mentioned, going to the States. So we have a lot of very successful story, German or Berliner, that they saw the opportunity, they see the opportunity to growth, and they needed to move to the States. So if you're Israeli, no one is waiting for you with red carpet or so. You just, relocate yourself, the team, and just take a decision because you maybe had like a new fund. But in Germany, and we are working very intensively with the German accelerator that there are in Silicon Valley and in New York, and it's unbelievable program. If you're really good enough and you show, that you are in a growth state, they're giving you 3 months, everything covered under, behalf of the government. And the people that runs that are very, very executive out of Facebook and big names. Actually, they know very well the local tech ecosystem. So they are opening a lot of doors. So as an Israeli, for a second, you could die to have this. You should build everything on your own. And this is things that in Germany, we have that support. So people just need to reach out sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that we started our conversation, our journey with Eric's story, and Eric was from my view, most inspirational, most best examples of how to build a new health ecosystem, user centricity, personal take, and technology which enables the basically facilitates the innovation. I would like to ask you to give just probably your very short assumption or free ideas. Who could be the most important partners to choose to build the next healthcare ecosystem, next gen healthcare ecosystem?
Okay. So last year I had a very interesting interview with the diabetic investor from the US. That's just his name. He's been diagnosed with diabetes type 1 for the last 20 years, so he's highly involved in the space. And what stuck with me was when he said that like the real shift in healthcare is going to come thanks to the new players that are entering healthcare, and that's the giants such as Amazon, Google, and other huge corporations. And the advantage that these corporations have compared to the smaller players is that they have enough capital to basically buy the best talent that they can get, and on the other hand, they have the best insight in the consumer space and the way the human psychology works and how you could really influence the behavioral change, which was one of the major issues and still is when it comes to why the retention in the use of healthcare apps is so small. So I think we're going to see very interesting things coming from these players
So
on a global level.
Yeah, e-commerce revolution, which happened 20 years ago, right now approaching the healthcare. Yeah. And
I would
Mali,
say
yours take.
that 5 years ago, I heard the German Wirtschaftsministerin mention that we need more Israelis here. And I didn't understand what she's talking about. But now I understand very well, and we're bringing a lot of technology from Tel Aviv to Germany, because Germany has amazing infrastructure. And the government understand that, which means if the government understand that, they will put a lot of effort and money to change that. And in another hand, they will push the corporates, which means investors, to open the pocket, and that will bring the change.
Wonderful, interesting. What would be your take, Joshua?
I would say the human factor. For me, it's really a super important point, and I want to make this clear that the community is, I think, the most important part. When we speak of knowledge, of education, I think this will be the most important part in the future. And I wanted to add something to the point before. I think in Germany we have a very, very high qualified researchers. We have a very high qualified startup scene, and we have high qualified workers here. A lot of people who work in Germany, in Berlin, in Hamburg, in Munich are very, very interesting people and have a lot of good ideas. And I cannot 100% compare this to every other market, but I haven't seen this in this extent, and on this very small space I haven't seen it before. So I think my takeaway would be, let's invest in the people, let's invest in giving them the chance to really innovate and give them the possibilities and the platform to find new solutions and build these solutions without having too many barriers. I do agree that certain barriers need to be there, but let's invest more in the people to really go further all together in an ecosystem that helps each other from all parts. And we need to integrate all different people, from business, from tech, from healthcare professions, patients. Everybody needs to be in the same boat to really innovate healthcare.
This is a truly call for action, and I really thank you for that insights, for that opinion. Anya, you have something to add.
Yeah, I will totally agree with you, because what we're seeing in Germany and Austria, we have such a lack of caregivers or carers, and we see that if they would be better fitting inside a team in a hospital, or better like their job or their caretakers, in psychosocial matching, we would see that we could do a lot, that we can take people, or people work longer at one job and don't switch to other areas. And I think addressing this kind of factor, like the psychosocial stuff, could really elevate and make it easier to have enough workforce in Austria and Germany. It could be one factor at least.
I think for me it would be also important to add that the free knowledge, the access to knowledge, and basically education, a different level of education. We still teach the medical doctors in the way as we used to teach them 100 years ago. And the new technologies approach, and we use these technologies, but we don't teach the medical doctors and the next generation of doctors who will be in healthcare in the next couple of years, how to use this technology, how to work with the patient, and how to communicate with the patient using this technology. This is essential level, and this is basically the lack of knowledge which we experience in the market. And maybe you, as a researcher, Dmitry, maybe you can add something.
So I'm going to agree with you, and I'm going to put once more again that emphasis on the user. So psychosocial factors, absolutely. So we have to deal with the emotional impact. So for example, you feed people a lot of data they don't like, they're very likely to reject the system. So we have to do a lot of research around the interactions with people in their data, these behavioral aspects, and of course, how we can help people to understand rather complex data. What I would argue, though, is absolutely essential is when we talk about the stakeholders, that we never forget about the user of the system as the stakeholder, and that their needs really have to be given the central emphasis. And if I were to find fault with America and Silicon Valley, often the user thinks they're getting the value, but in fact they're often being used. And from an ethical point of view, and also for the long term of these systems, we really have to figure out how to put the needs of the patient, the user, really at the pinnacle of this whole system. And it's true, things have to make money, they have to be sustainable, but the patient, the user, what they need, their requirements, that they really need to be integrated fully into these development processes, which is not easy, but we have to figure out how to do that.
Super nice. Do you want to add something?
I mean, actually, I really love it because you gave me another thing that it's actually the differentiation. It's the early adopters. Like, they know that they're using them. Like Google Waze, sharing a new version. It's first of all for this area as a beta test, and everyone said like, I have to use it. I'm the first one that get that. But actually, you're right. Like they're using them, but it's a win-win situation, and they are like to be the early adopters for everything. So it's really attitude, and I would love to see it also in Germany, in general in Europe, like. The one that want to be leading in something.
Millennials are coming. The next generation are coming, so they're mostly early adopters. So that we will experience in the workforce in the next 5 or 10 years, basically the whole millennials population will help with that. We have a couple of minutes left, and I would like to open the Q&A. And please raise your hand. I will give you a mic, and use the opportunity to ask the expert the questions.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful discussion. So I'm doing my PhD on IoT and medical healthcare and the impact of IoT in healthcare. So recently, apparently, the European Union has launched GDPR, and it has really strict conditions on how to collect data regarding consumers. Like everybody has to give consent about the use of the data, extension of how long you can keep the data. So what do you think this type of regulation will have on like the developing of new technologies, particularly in the IoT sphere, because you need data for algorithms, and then in China, in the US, they have much less strict regulations on data collection. So that's my question. Thank you.
Who would like to take on?
Okay, I'll take this question. So I think this debate around the data ownership and privacy really opened up because of two things in the last year. One is the issues with interoperability, which were caused by the fact that, for example, in the US, with the HIPAA and all the other legislations that were put in place a few years ago, all the medical institutions got electronic health records digitized, and nobody was really thinking hard on how that data is going to be managed. Now, we have the situation that you all know, which is that each hospital has their own healthcare system and they're not connected to each other. So one debate when it comes to research and how it's going to play in the future is, are we going to support open data standards, which is not to say that the data is going to be flowing around freely. It's just going to be structured in a way that the research is going to be enabled. In terms of the data privacy and ownership, that's where blockchain basically came in with the transparency and the GDPR, meaning that we need some sort of a base layer where you as a patient will have this transparency and will have this trace on who uses your data and why. And that's what blockchain projects are also trying to push forward, which is that you as a patient should be at least a part of the equation when it comes to monetization of the data. So you're not excluded from that.
I think we have to also think over and then do not mix data protection with the data privacy. It's two completely different things. And from my experience working with the startups, so basically most of the startups, especially in the B2C market, they embrace these GDPR regulations because they can just be completely secure and go straight to the market and develop the product and bring the product in the mass production. Other questions, please?
First, I apologize if my question is repetitive because I walk in the middle of the discussion. I represent Person Clinic, which is a startup company in the US. And we try to participate in a couple European-based challenge. And we learned that we're not qualified because we are US-based. Now I'm here looking for collaboration with the research centers and potentially getting to some accelerator in European-based accelerators. And I was listening and I was hoping maybe one of you will refer to the doors that open for US-based company when it comes to healthcare, and particularly going through the use case and doing some cohorts for health IT-based innovation. Based on my research, I felt that Europe is a better starting point for us, and that is our aim here. So if you can give us some hints where to start, and is it possible for a US-based startup to have a cohort in here in collaboration with the research institute? Maybe you can answer that.
I will tell you that there are a lot of US startups coming to Germany, coming to Berlin. So this is an open door for you. They are more than welcome. They're bringing new spirit, and we really hug them very carefully and let them dive into the ecosystem and know different way. All these evaluation things and how to approach the market, it's very, very different. I would suggest, I'm mentoring, and also Nana, in the Startup Bootcamp, and I would suggest that you will approach them. You can approach us afterwards as well, and they are doing amazing work in Europe.
I would add just a little bit. So basically, the German market is open for any other ecosystem. That's why basically the meaning to bring the different regions and just to elaborate a little bit story about the ecosystem working and advantages, disadvantages, different countries. And for that reason, Germany offers a fantastic infrastructure opportunities. So and I just would like also to add the Berlin partners, especially in Berlin, because Berlin, I think, became at the moment the capital for the startups. So over here, I've seen the stand of Berlin partners, and they have a particular agency and which will help any other startups coming from China, Japan, United States to approach German market and to have the second home for your innovative products. And the same thing we would love also to have in United States. It would be interesting to exchange, and we discuss a lot about the go-to-market strategy and advantages, disadvantages. That would be also interesting to have the same opportunity, but I don't think that will happen in the next couple of years.
I will jump in a second because like Start Alliance, it's called Start Alliance, so probably they will kill me that I didn't mention that. But actually just yesterday, we kick off the next delegation in Berlin. It's 20 startups from 10 countries coming for 2 weeks, only healthcare industry. So definitely yes.
Also from the side of science or from research institutes in Berlin, as well as I know in Hamburg, you have at the hospitals you usually have an innovation part. In Berlin, it's the Berlin Institute of Health. In Hamburg, they also have an accelerator program at their hospitals. So I think the ecosystem is here. Sometimes you need to have a longer breath in Germany, but I mean,
once you enter it, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah,
And then
definitely
move,
yes.
Yeah, Munich and so on and so on. Any further questions? Okay.
Of course, with every disruption, there is always the disruptor and the disrupted. And of course, as I'm a physician myself, and I see, of course, the future, like 10 years from now, there's also the fear of the end of expertise, like AI will take over my diagnostic eye, my clinical eye will be turned into AI, and then and now I'm also thinking about my future as a physician and how best to cope with this. Should I just be an innovator myself? Should I do a startup? What would you advise to the disrupted to survive in the upcoming revolution?
Yes, I think it's for sure.
So when I started my research as a person who's lived with diabetes a lot of years, my physician often did not play a very big role in my management. And my first thought was, forget about the physicians. We're just gonna algorithm them away. However, with my research, I've talked to a lot of people, and I found that a lot of people really value their personal relationship with their physician, that this is a very important part of their care. So I think the personal factors that the physician can give, I think the role of the physician might change a bit away from diagnostics, which I think algorithms are probably in many cases going to outperform physicians because, you know, a physician cannot track the literature just on a specialty at this point, let alone everything that's out there. So I think the role of the physician is potentially going to change, but my sense is that many people very much value that relationship, and a lot of it is possibly going to shift more to the psychosocial aspects of disease care, maybe a little bit less from the take this many molecules every month, and more to some of the other factors.
And I would just add also as a physician, so I think the multidisciplinarity is the key success to